Welcome to Perspectives, a podcast where the clergy women of the First United Methodist Church of San Diego share their musings on scripture, theology, and what it has to do with us. Welcome to another episode of Perspectives. This is Reverend Hanaka, and I'm delighted to have Demmie Divine with me this morning, who is the Director of Member Care Ministries here at First Church, to share her perspectives on hospitality. So welcome, Demmie.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining me this morning. Today we'll be looking at Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2 that says, "Don't neglect to open up your homes to guests, because by doing this, some have been hosts to angels without knowing it." So let me unpack the story a little bit about the epistle to the Hebrews. We don't know who the author was and who the recipients were, and we don't know when this letter was written. We can just have a rough guesstimate between 60 and 100 after the Common Era, about a generation or two after Jesus' ministry, with a fairly developed Christology. What we know of the Hebrews is that it appears to be an example of sermon that is rabbinical in design and Christian in content. So if you're interested in what's in the Hebrews, I invite you to read the entirety of the letter to follow the author's theological articulation on who Jesus was and what Jesus did. And if you reach chapter 13, the author talks about Jesus for 12 chapters, and when you reach the 13th chapter that has today's verse, you feel a little change in the tone from the first 12 chapters. That's because the former sermon is done, it's over, and the author is moving on to announcements and benediction. Just like our traditional worship, it's their faith in action. So within that context, let's hear this verse one more time. "Don't neglect to open up your homes to guests, because by doing this, some have been hosts to angels without knowing it." The preacher is addressing the routine aspects of congregational life to the ministry of hospitality and visiting with the sick and stewardship and service to the world. And with those in mind, let me ask Demmie how she relates to this text with regard to the ministry of hospitality.
When my son was in high school, he started bringing people to live with us. Mm-hmm. You know, the first was a friend whose parents were divorced or something, and the mother was working 2 jobs, and his friend was working, and so he couldn't play baseball, which was his favorite thing to do. So Brian had him come live with us, so he didn't have to, so he could play baseball. And he was just the first in a long line of young men that, you know, some of them were his cousins came to live with us. One of my friends, her son, came to live with us. But Brian, you know, he brought people that needed help in some way. You know, they didn't have a place to live. They couldn't afford to live in an apartment by themselves. And it was kind of an ongoing joke of how many people had been to live with us.
And you're one of those first persons who notices when a new visitor walks into the sanctuary. So what do you do when you spot a new visitor?
If they're on an aisle or someplace easy to approach them, I walk up and say hello. And if they seem open, you know, I ask them how they found us. You know, I ask, you know, if they get into conversation, we talk about where they're from, what their religious, you know, if they're from another church or if they're Methodist background, and what part of town they live in. I just try to, you know, glean as much information as I can, and then I ask them if they'll give us, you know, tell them if they'll give us an email or something. We can send them our electronic newsletter, and we'd love to see them again, and if there's anything they need,
So
that kind of thing.
it sounds like you're welcoming them warmly while getting some information from them to get to know them.
Yes.
And to be hospitable to their desire to stay connected with the church. So what other questions do you ask? And why do you ask those questions in specific?
Well, for instance, if they live in a neighborhood where I know there's a neighborhood group, I can point them in that direction. If they're young and might be interested in Jason's fourth Sunday brunch, I can point them in that direction, or tell them about it. Sometimes they say something. I know there's already a connection with somebody else in the congregation. We've had people who taught at Point Loma Nazarene, and we have other members who come from Point Loma Nazarene, that kind of thing.
So out of the information they give you, you're connecting people there with church groups and people.
Trying.
Yes, that's great. And how can I be helpful in reaching out to them when they first visit the church or after their visit?
Well, people always love it when a minister talks to them. If someone remembers their name, they love that too. Makes them feel, well, I don't know what the word is. They just
Feel the warmth.
yeah, and connecting. The minister. Sometimes the minister has. I don't want to say clout. The minister carries more weight when the minister asks them or tells them about something that they might be interested in.
I hear you, and I call you a church stalker, so you can use different vocabularies around the ministers carrying more weight. But what can others in our church, in the sanctuary, in the pews, can do to welcome those people?
When you see someone in the section you're in or in the row you're in that you don't know, even if you think that they're not new, say hello to them, try to get to know them. We've got a section that keeps growing because that group of people is very welcoming, and they've kind of embraced, people that were sitting near them that were alone, and now they're kind of a growing group that comes every Sunday, and some of them are in neighborhood groups, not together, but they all do puzzles, and they exchange puzzles, that kind of thing. It just, they've welcomed people, and in particular, there's a man who was a widow, and he was sitting alone, and he was nice, and I think he was comfortable. He wasn't uncomfortable, but over a period of time, he got incorporated into that group, and now has a new friend, and I'm sure he's happy.
Oh, I hear you saying that there are sections that's already a good group of people, and they're expanding and welcoming and growing together. So by being there on Sunday morning, you can be hospitable.
Yes.
And do you want to share a little bit about how I gave you a challenging work?
Are we talking about WhatsApp?
Yes.
I'm not a great IT person, but I do have apps on my phone, and you must have done research about WhatsApp and decided that a great way to connect for staff and other members to connect with visitors and greet visitors would be using the WhatsApp. And so you signed us up, and on Sunday morning, if we see someone, we we just send a note that there's this person sitting, in this place, and this is what they look like. Could somebody greet them? Or I've already greeted them, whatever.
Yes, and that's an invitation for us to say, if you want to be a part of hospitality team, let us know that we can sign you up for WhatsApp as well, so you get to hear who's new in the sanctuary, who's new in your section and in your pews, so that you can gently greet those people and add more hospitality to our welcoming spirit. And if you're also online, you can welcome each other and greet one another and ask if there's anyone new visiting us online as well. So with all those procedures about greeting people, I would like to hear your words about what you learned from all those years of greeting and welcoming people into the life of this church, and anything that we need to be mindful of.
Well, I guess I've learned that you can't make assumptions about people, about how they look or how they're feeling. Sometimes people are suffering, and your greeting might be the thing that just makes their day. People look different, people act different. You just have to be brave and say hello and find out. You might be amazed what you find out. Sometimes people, they meet somebody that, they say hello to somebody and end up having a connection with that person right away because there's something, a background, a hobby, anything that they can relate to.
Awesome. That's a good way of connecting. And I heard you saying, do not make any assumptions, but welcome them with curiosity and be curious about what their days have been like.
Yes, let them tell you their story.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for joining me today for this conversation. Do you have one last word to say?
Well, can I tell one of the stories I told you?
Of course.
So years ago, there was a mother's group, and we had speakers every once in a while, and we had a speaker who was a teacher of teachers, and someone in the audience was upset because there was a person with green hair, and they were concerned about this person, dealing with their child. And the man said, it might be a perfectly nice person who just happens to have green hair. And that's where, you can't assume, that someone is from or thinks in a certain way just because they look different.
Thank you for sharing that experience. And that was the caveat for our conversation today. And with this conversation in mind, I would like to invite you to consider those questions. What was the warmest welcome you ever received, and when you walked into a new space full of strangers? And why and how did it make you feel most welcomed? With those experiences, how can we and you welcome strangers, friends you haven't met yet? Thanks for joining us today. See you next time.
This is a production of First United Methodist Church of San Diego. To learn more about our events and ministries and to access additional learning resources, visit FUMCSD.org.